Ladies and gentlemen of the Union of American Hebrew Congregations, my name is Louis Marshall, and I'm one of the founders of the American Jewish Committee. And I'm here to speak of a subject. Thank you. Hold your applause. I'm here to speak of a subject of vital concern to every American citizen: the Russian passport question. American citizenship has hitherto been regarded as a priceless treasure. Men have gladly given for it their lives and all their material possessions. It has been to them a badge of honor and distinction. It has peopled the wilderness and lighted the torch of progress and civilization. And yet, there rests a stain on the honor of our nation and the integrity of the American citizenship. For the passport issued by the State Department bearing the great seal of our country is dishonored, rejected, and arbitrarily disregarded by the Russian government whenever the citizen by whom it is presented happens to be a Jew. It matters not if he be able to trace his ancestry to those who landed with Columbus, to those who were among the settlers who came to New York in 1655, to those who fought in the War of Independence. All are denied the privilege of entering its domain, though fully armored with American citizenship. And for more than 30 years, this has been the declared policy of the Russian government. Its discrimination against our citizens has been persistently and constantly avowed and acted upon. No man within the hearing of my voice who professes to be a Jew, however eloquent in true Americanism his life has been, can venture within the walls which Russia has erected against the outside world, even though accredited by a passport from our government, without having his credentials figuratively torn and into shreds and cast defiantly into his face. Ever since 1832, Russia has been under treaty obligation to accord all of our citizens, without distinction, the liberty to sojourn and reside in all parts of her territory and to guarantee them security and protection. There is no exception, express or implied, in the Commercial Treaty of 1832. Its terms are of universal application. There is no distinction of race or color, creed or sex. All Russians are to be admitted here. All Americans are to be admitted there. If it were suggested by our government that no Russian subject who is a resident of St. Petersburg or of Moscow or a member of the Greek Catholic Church be accorded the rights of this treaty, we would be regarded as guilty of a gross violation of its letter and its spirit. If Russia should declare that no citizens of the United States residing west of the Mississippi or south of the Ohio should receive the benefits of this treaty, not only the South and the West, but our entire country would stand aghast at the dishonor inflicted on the entire nation. If Russia should announce that it would not honor the passport of the United States when held by an Episcopalian, or a Presbyterian, or a Methodist, or a Roman Catholic, our country would not look upon this breach of treaty obligation as a mere insult to the Episcopalians or the Presbyterians, the Methodists or the Roman Catholics of this country, but would justly treat it as a blow inflicted upon every man who holds dear the title of American citizen. And though this proposition is so plain that discussion and illustration are unnecessary, Russia has persisted in the practice of requiring its consuls in America to interrogate American citizens as to their race and religious faith, and upon ascertainment thereof, to deny Jews authentication of their passports or legal documents for use in Russia. The Russian government has thus broken its compact, flouted its obligations, and ignored a series of continued protests voiced by every president of the United States since the President Hayes. The painfully slow methods of diplomacy have failed. We, a nation of 100 million Americans, stand at the door of Russia, hat in hand, pleading with it that it shall recognize and perform its contract. And with sardonic smile, Russia answers, "Еще нет." Not yet. It is within the power of a country situated as ours is to isolate Russia and to terminate all treaty relations with a government which fails to recognize the solemnity and the sanctity of its treaty obligations. And that is exactly what should be done without further delay. And 100 years later, here you are. Here we are. The words I delivered that day, the argument that was made, and the subsequent resolution in favor of abrogation passed by the Union of American Hebrew Congregations were heard well outside the conference halls. Thousands of copies of my speech were distributed to congressmen, state legislators, newspapers, clergymen, lawyers, and others. This activity did not go unnoticed at Pennsylvania Avenue. President Taft invited a delegation of Jewish leaders to the White House for a luncheon meeting on February 11, 1911. And the conferees decided that I and Jacob Schiff, both of the American Jewish Committee, would serve as spokesmen. And although it happened long ago, I remember it well. One does not easily forget a meeting at the White House, certainly not like the one we were to have. President Taft told us that he agreed thoroughly with our interpretation of the treaty. He said our position was correct, that this was discrimination against American citizens, and our country could not acquiesce. But President Taft felt there were a great many complications. Including business interests. He was not willing to break the treaty. He felt that we might accomplish something by diplomacy, and he was willing to make a statement that he would take the matter under consideration. Mr. Jacob Schiff responded, "No, Mr. President, you must make a statement just as drastic, just as bold as you have made to us now. Your administration has an opportunity to do a great good." My good friend then turned to me and asked me to discuss the matter further. I said to the President, it seemed to me there was very little to discuss, in view of the fact that he had just admitted all our premises. President Taft had a most unhappy half hour. He kept his equanimity and his good humor, but it was evident he was very uncomfortable. That meeting with Taft had not been a success. But that does not mean that success would elude us. There was still another option, Congress. A congressional resolution for terminating the treaty. And so we went to work, at times alone, at times cooperating with like-minded organizations. It was a campaign that took the better part of the year. Editors and journalists were encouraged to write articles, and we saved every article and ended with 4,000 news clippings. 4,000! I was inundated with letters of support. The most interesting one came from the Roman Catholic Bishop of Scranton. He told us that Roman Catholic priests were also denied visas. And we were later to learn that the same applied to Protestant missionaries. And so a subcommittee was formed to work with religious organizations as well. State legislatures were urged to pass their own abrogation rallies. And there were meetings, many of them, with senators and congressmen. And pro-abrogation rallies were held in Albany, Boston, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and in New York, where Woodrow Wilson spoke. And our appeal to the public succeeded. It was surprising how American citizens all over, once thoroughly understanding the situation, rose, I might say, as one, and demanded that action be taken in ending this intolerable situation. And so, on December 11 and 12, 1911, I and 3 of my American Jewish Committee colleagues testified before the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. And on December 13, 1911, the resolution for abrogation was passed by a vote of 300 to 1. Knowing that the resolution would pass the Senate, and wanting to avoid embarrassment, President Taft instructed the U.S. ambassador to Russia to communicate his intention of terminating the Treaty of 1832. The New York Times declared it was the right step, it was the proper procedure, it gives effect to the will and desire of the American people. And this was indeed a victory for the American people. As for the American Jewish Committee, well, we were in 1911 a mere 5 years old. Not a long history for an institution, but our success here augured well for our future, I dare say. With this triumphant achievement, I sensed we now had a solid foundation. I knew not what struggles and challenges would confront the Jewish people in the forthcoming years. But I was confident that the American Jewish Committee would be there, a champion of liberty. Thank you.